food chain which starts with detritus is called as a detritus food chain. Whereas a food chain starting with a producer, grasshopper. Grass is a producer. So whenever a food chain starts with a producer, it is called as a grazing food chain. A grazing food chain. There is a third type of food chain in nature which is called as a parasitic food chain, which the NCERT has not discussed. Right? This is only in case you come across in some other question. Right? It should remain in the back of mind. हाँ ये तीसरे type का food chain भी होता है. Okay. So NCERT is discussing only these two types of food chains, a DFC and a GFC. DFC stands for a detritus food chain. GFC is a grazing food chain. What does the grazing food chain start with? Producer. And DFC starts with detritus. Okay. Death of the organism is the beginning of the DFC. Death of the organism is the start of DFC. The DFC starts with dead organic matter. It is made up of decomposers which are heterotrophic organisms, mainly fungi, bacteria. They meet their energy and nutrient requirements by degrading dead organic matter or detritus. They are also known as saprotrophs. Saprotrophs. Please, जैसे autotrophs है, heterotrophs है, वैसे saprotrophs है. Nothing difficult about that. But sometimes you will come across a word called as saprophytes. They are saprophytic in nature. For practical purposes, they are the same. There is not much of a difference between a saprotroph and a saprophyte. Right? You will find them being used instead of each other also. There is a very minute difference between a saprotroph and a saprophyte. And I like that difference, but it is not for our consumption. You can ignore it. The problem needs me. ठीक है ना? Saprotrophs. Now, what do saprotrophs do? What is the action of a saprotroph? Decomposer will secrete digestive enzyme. It will secrete a digestive enzyme. So, I have a decomposer. I have detritus. So, it is secreting digestive enzyme. Okay, very good. That break down the dead and waste material. So, what will happen is the complex organic will be broken down into simple inorganic. Is this catabolism?
Yes.
Right now? Into simple inorganic material which are subsequently absorbed by them. It is for their nutrition, isn't it? So, tell me, is this process intracellular or extracellular? Extracellular, exactly. Understood? So ये इसने अपने सिस्टम में से एंजाइम बाहर सीक्रेट किया, ये अभी भी एनवायरनमेंट में ही है, इसका ब्रेकडाउन हुआ, इसका ब्रेकडाउन होकर कन्वर्ट हुआ सिंपल में, और सिंपल जो है फिर से एब्जॉर्ब किया इसने. Right? This is a saprotroph, whereas a saprophyte would work intracellular. Slight, even they will do the same thing. उनके लिए भी कॉम्प्लेक्स टू सिंपल कन्वर्जन ही है. So please, if saprotroph and saprophyte come, two different words, don't get misled कि ये दो अलग-अलग चीजें. No, you can use them one for the other also. कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. Okay. In an aquatic ecosystem, the energy flow is more through GFC than DFC. In an aquatic, देखो दो टाइप के सिस्टम्स हमने स्टार्टिंग में ही डिवीजन कर दिया था, टेरेस्ट्रियल और एक्वेटिक. We are studying energy flow, and for that energy flow you require a food chain. So terrestrial में which food chain is more dominant? Aquatic में which food chain is more dominant? In aquatic we have GFC, which is the more dominant one, probably because of the paucity of decomposers in the water system. Okay, and in a terrestrial ecosystem it is the DFC. So please make note here, aquatic के point में please write GFC more than DFC. The question is asked like that. And in the terrestrial it is the DFC more than GFC. I were in your place, so I would learn only one of them, not both of them, please. See again, this is not an NCERT diagram, please. If you can see this is a green leaf, so it starts from a producer, so this should be which type of a food chain? Grazing food chain. This is a dead leaf, so it should be a detritus food chain. A very simple example to highlight this fact, please take them right now. So we find this is the grazing food chain. Please. And this is a detritus food chain. Now in the detritus food chain, the detritus is acted upon by detrivore. Is this a detrivore?
Yes.
Now detrivore can either travel ahead in the chain, it will be taken up by a higher trophic level, or it can be taken up by a insectivorous bird also. So do we find an intersection of the GFC and DFC? That is what makes it a web. Okay, see the description. Detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain. We find this connection at 2 points we find this connection. Okay, some of the organism of DFC are prey to GFC animals. And in a natural ecosystem, some animals like cockroach or crow, they are omnivores, so obviously they are going to at both the levels. So these interconnections make it a food web, right? So we find that this organism here is having two sources of food here. And that is what? So ये दोनों chains is point पे intersect हो रही. So that's why what is real in actual systems is food web and not food chain.
Can be other way around, that like from the GSC coming into the DFC.
Give me an example, show it to me. Think over it. Yes. GFC. Yes.
The hawk will again go into the start of the DFC.
So all these, see, there are multiple interconnections in that. As I said now, the sources of food are multiple. That's why these interconnections are very complex. So to consider only a food chain is in theory, not in practical.
So DFC on its own is not sustainable because there's no energy input.
No, and उसका detritus से energy आ रहा है ना?
Only if it has to be connected to a GSC.
Obviously. Okay. Every level in this food chain, right now, is called as a trophic level. Now, trophic level also I had come into our discussion earlier. I told you what do you mean by troph? Nourishment, nutrition. Troph means a nutrition. So the green plants are all producers. So you say this is the first trophic level. In the exam, it will not be ekdam for you evidently mention first trophic level. They will write it as T1. Okay, T1, T2, T3 and T4 like that. So the herbivores, the second trophic level, the carnivores, the third trophic level, fourth level will be the top. So trophic levels are organisms occupy a place in the natural surrounding or in a community according to their feeding relationship with other organisms. Feeding relationship with other organisms, being eating or being eaten up. So is that a feeding relationship again? Based on the source of their nutrition or food, organisms occupy a specific place in the food chain, that is their trophic level, nourishment level. Producers belong to the first trophic level, herbivores to the second, carnivores to the third and so on. The most important point is the amount of energy decreases at successive trophic levels. We know it follows which rule? 10% rule. School में पढ़ा हमने, right ना? The 10% rule. नहीं पढ़ा है. Okay. Sir book में था लेकिन omit था. ये भी बहुत favorite है एकदम. Anyway, we will come across it. Don't worry. When an organism dies, it is converted to detritus or biomass that serves as the energy source for decomposers. Organisms at each trophic level depend on those at the lower trophic level for their energy demands. So consumers will depend on producers for their energy demands. The secondary consumer will depend on the primary consumer. The tertiary will depend on the secondary consumer. See, please, this is a system which has been designed by nature. Understand that. The entire balance, the checks, balances are kept by nature. When we studied certain points in previous discussions like predation, right now, a predator is always prudent. It does not over-exploit the prey. So this instinct of not over-exploiting has been given by nature, so that it itself does not get extinct in the long run. These checks and balances have been kept by nature. And why today we are looking at loss of biodiversity is because we have disturbed this balance. We are interrupting this balance. Right? We are more focusing on some of the levels of the trophic levels. We are disturbing those levels. If we allow nature to function in its own way, the nature has its own way of balancing everything. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living material. What is certain mass of living? Biomass. Biomass. At a particular time called as a standing crop. Please, यहाँ पर of paramount importance is at a particular time. At a particular time. Right? So if this classroom is the area under supervision. Right now, यहाँ पर producers कितने हैं? Right? Let's say I have to count the number of plants. What is the amount of biomass that they are generating today? I want to calculate that. I will do the same thing tomorrow. So what I calculate for today is going to be standing crop for today. What I do for tomorrow will be standing crop for tomorrow at a particular time. So that adding is more important. अगर वो अंदर से निकल गया ना तो आपका स्टेटमेंट गलत हो जाएगा. वो टाइम वाला फैक्टर चला गया तो वो स्टेटमेंट गलत हो जाएगा. टाइम वाला फैक्टर चला गया तो सिर्फ बायोमास आएगा. Right? The amount of certain mass of living material. What is that called as? Biomass. But when you calculate a particular time, it is called as standing crop. So every trophic level will have a standing crop value. The standing crop is measured as the mass of living organisms or the number in a unit area. The biomass of species is expressed in terms of fresh weight or dry weight, and dry weight is more accurate. एक minute, just a minute. Yes, what is fresh weight, dry weight? We have discussed this before in biomolecules. Ash analysis. Right, whenever? Yes. No. You went in the wrong direction. You went to chemical analysis. Yes, Miss.
Okay. Dry weight is the example. If you take a piece of liver, it's wet weight, and then you dehydrate it, and then on working the remaining.
Very good. Yes, got it. Good. Right now. So when you take it with the water component, it is fresh weight, and after removal of water, it is called as the dry weight. The number of trophic levels in the GFC. What is the GFC? Very.
Why do we take dry weight? Like it exists as wet weight.
No, but then the amount of water has certain conditions to it, is variable from time to time.
Okay, this is
Right.
constant.
For example, if I take it in a humid season or a non-humid season, the amount of water would be different. Okay, so that's why dry weight is more accurate. Okay. The number of trophic levels in a GFC. What's a GFC? Starts with the producer. Okay. Restricted as the transfer of energy follows the 10% law. Right? Now what does the 10% law state? That the transfer of energy is always 10% to the next trophic level. You had a question mark on your face for that 10% law.
हाँ, समझ गए।
याद आया क्या?
नहीं बट समझ
The transfer is always 10%. Now this law of 10% was given by Lindemann, right? ना बराबर दिया था वहाँ पे, था बुक में था, very good, thank you. Okay. Only 10% of the energy is transferred to each trophic level from the lower trophic level. So obviously when I look at, for example, 1,000 joules of energy at the producer level, so it will become 100 at the primary consumer, it will become 10 at the secondary consumer, 1 at the tertiary consumer level. So for the ecosystem to sustain, right, the energy starts diminishing. So it cannot sustain an infinite number of trophic levels. So we'll find that the number of levels in a grazing food chain could be maximum 5, 6, not more than that, depending on the amount of energy in the producers also. Because every level पे you require energy to sustain a specific number of individuals. If that is the case, अगर energy successive levels पे 90% से कम हो रही है, सिर्फ 10% जा रही है, तो क्या आगे का ट्रॉफिक लेवल पे the number of organisms also keep on reducing? That is a perfectly logical, वरना sustain कैसे करेगा वो? So that's why in an ecosystem, the largest in number are always plants, and the lowest in number are always the top level predators. Right? That is called pyramid of numbers. Okay. So in nature it is possible to have so many levels: producer, herbivore, primary carnivore, secondary carnivore in the grazing food chain.
The 10% thing starts from the producer of the farmers.
Producers. Okay. From the producers. Yeah. So 1,000 producers, primary consumer 100. 1. Okay. Now ecological pyramids. Ecological pyramids are also called as Eltonian pyramids. Some guy called Elton had submitted. John ने I think it was Charles, उसका छोटा भाई शायद से जो है नहीं please long back. Okay. Now food or energy relationships between organisms at different levels. Food or energy relationship between organisms at different levels. यानी कितना food या energy is present with producers. I compare it to how much it is present with primary consumers. How much when I compare it at different levels, right? Now it is represented by means of a pyramid, right? So do I get a pyramid? Right? This relationship is expressed in terms of number, biomass or energy. So, you have pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass and pyramid of energy. So, we have to study 3 types of these relationship: pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass and pyramid of energy. Any calculations, this is a very important point, please you can star mark this point please. Any calculation of energy content, biomass or number, यानी ये तीनों भी pyramid को construct करने के टाइम पे, any calculations has to include all the organisms at trophic level. You have to include all the organisms at the trophic level. No generalizations we make. Right ना? हम लोग ने 1% लैंड में कैलकुलेट कर लिया और उसको क्या बोलते हैं उसको extrapolate कर लिया to 100%, that would only make it a educated guess. ठीक है ना? So you have to include all the organisms. You cannot take a small number and just rationalize it, right? So if we take only few individuals, it is not allowed. You can't generalize it. Okay, that is an important condition for this pyramid. Also, a given organism may occupy more than one trophic level simultaneously. Quite possible, right? Homo sapiens, man, can be at the primary consumer, can be at the secondary consumer, can be at the tertiary, depending on the source of food that we are having. It can be at any of the levels, right? Now this is what, just 1 minute. This is what is one of the biggest limitations of the pyramid. The pyramids are constructed considering that a species is occurring only at one trophic level, जो कि गलत है, right? Now, as an organism, we can exist at all the levels except producer, obviously, right? So where will you count our number? Where will you count our biomass? कैलकुलेशन करते वक्त हमको किधर रखा जाएगा? You can be placed only at one level, but functionally we are present at multiple levels. So calculations can go haywire. Okay, so ये pyramids का सबसे बड़ा limitation है. We will come to that limitation वाला part towards the end. Right now, yeah, your question. Sorry.
There's no generalization. We are making generalization. We just can't make them if we don't.
No, we are saying no generalization can be made if we are considering only a small percentage.
So we consider everything, then we can give some generalization for.
We cannot, in this case, you cannot make a generalization. You have to consider all the organisms. That's it.
Like I think we can be sir, we can be primary consumer, we can be secondary consumer, कुछ भी कहाँ पे भी आ सकते, that's what.
I get point. I get वापस. Don't worry. One must remember that the trophic level represents a functional level. Right? When I say producers, in general, I mean all the organisms performing photosynthesis. So that is a functional level. I am not specifying a species as such. Okay. A given species may occupy more than one trophic level in the same ecosystem. देखो छोटा example दिया. A sparrow, when it eats seeds and fruits, is a primary consumer. But the same sparrow, when it consumes insects and worms, it becomes a secondary consumer.
So now where you put it in the.
That is why it is a limitation.
Okay.
Isn't it?
हाँ.
अगर नंबर काउंट करता है तो स्पैरो तो एक ही है. बायोमास स्पैरो का एक ही तो मैं कहाँ डालूंगा उसको? प्राइमरी पे, सेकेंडरी पे कहाँ डालूंगा उसको मैं?
But you have to put it on one.
Yes, and that is not possible. जी यश बोलो.
तो सर आप सैप्रोफाइट को कहाँ रखोगे?
वो भी एक लिमिटेशन है. सैप्रोफाइट को कंसिडर ही नहीं किया लोग ने. ठीक है ना? वो भी एक इशू है. चलो, in most of the ecosystems, all the pyramids, number, biomass, energy, तीन है ना pyramids तो. Most of the ecosystems, they are upright. Upright मतलब ये वाला शेप. So number में, biomass में, energy. See, energy you cannot have anything else because the amount of energy going ahead is only 10%. There is no other case. So when I say number, so the number of producers is the highest. फिर primary consumer उससे कम हो जाएगा, secondary consumer उससे कम हो जाएगा. समझ रहे pyramid of number का मतलब? Biomass में same case है, right? Also, the energy at the lower trophic level is always more than at the higher level. Now, they have given diagrams for each of the pyramids. These are all NCERT diagrams, please. The first is for pyramid of number, the second is for pyramid of biomass. The pyramid of number and pyramid of biomass. Now, see, I have given you the यहाँ पे tag also यहाँ पे, it is 12.4a diagram. Pyramid of numbers in a grassland ecosystem. Mark that, please. grassland ecosystem. Now if you look at the numbers, at the producer level, they have given you a number of what, 58 lakhs 42,000, that is roughly around 60 lakhs or 6 million. But when you look at the primary consumer, that means the grassland ecosystem, which is consisting of 60 lakh plants, can support only 7 lakh primary consumers. क्योंकि ये अपने एनर्जी रिक्वायरमेंट के लिए किस पे डिपेंडेंट है? इस पे 7 lakh primary consumers can support only 3.5 lakh carnivores in the system, right? Now that is secondary consumers, but they in turn can support only 3 tertiary. Can you see the sharp fall now? And that is the sharp fall which is forming the apex of the pyramid now. That means an ecosystem which is having 60 million plants, 60 million structures, can support only 3 individuals of the top level. That's why the number of top level predators will always be less. The number will always be less. Precisely the top level predator. ठीक है? What is this now? It is a pyramid of number. Same case you will find in case of pyramid of biomass. खाली biomass में देखिए वहां पे dry weight लिखा है, किलोग्राम पर मीटर स्क्वायर लिखा है. Right? In the above diagram it is just a number of individuals. Right? So you can see the same is the case in there also. Again you see a very sharp decrease when it comes towards the top. It's a bar graph, that's why. Okay. Now for pyramid of number and pyramid of biomass, there are exceptions. Right? हमने क्या majority of ecosystem सब upright है, लेकिन इसके लिए exception है, इसके लिए exception, इसके लिए exception नहीं है. There cannot be. So first let us see pyramid of energy, then we'll come to the exceptions, please. Here, see pyramid of energy. Pyramid of energy is always upright, can never be inverted. Can never be inverted. Because when energy flows from a particular trophic level to the next trophic level, some energy is always lost as heat. How much energy is lost? 90%. And what goes ahead is only 10%. Yes, in this particular diagram, if you can see, energy is mentioned in terms of joules. And can you see this is 10%? Please mark that. Please mark that as 10%. At every step, can you see it is 10%? At every step it is 10%. But please have a look at this figure. This is 1%. So this is ISR. This is not PAR.
But 1% that नीचे वाला is 10,000 is PAR.
No, this is your level present with producer. PAR बीच में घुस गया यहाँ पे, तो इसका 1% कन्वर्जन हुआ है ना, इसका 1% कन्वर्जन हुआ है, तो ये कौन सा वैल्यू हो गया? ये अपना ISR का वैल्यू हो गया. So this is the total sunlight which was incident on the surface of earth. उसका PAR was, what was PAR? Less than 50%. उसका 2 to 10% was trapped by the plants. So 1% of ISR. So please, my request to you is, they will give you this figure in the exam and they will put a question mark on the subsequent ones and they'll ask you to identify these कितने हैं. So blindly just don't go on 10% here. हाँ, पहले 1%, उसके बाद 10%. हाँ, so 10% is only from the producer onwards. Right? This is again one of the most grave errors made by students because they don't identify this 1%. लिख लो please, write it in your notes or NCERT that this transfer is 1%, उसके आगे 10% है. See, these are the small areas where we need to fight up, please. ये बहुत छोटे छोटे errors है. Then suddenly when they come together na, they become magnified in the form of 330. है ना? Okay. Now, no exception for pyramid of energy. In any case, it is going to be always upright. But we mentioned there are exceptions for the first two. Right? So, majority of the ecosystems mein, you will find it is upright. For pyramid of number, there are exceptions to this generalization. Now, if you are considering a forest ecosystem, forest mein you have trees. Mr. Gupta, you are not paying attention. Sure? Right? बहुत अच्छा होली खेला आपने, देख रहा हूँ मैं. Right? कलर अभी भी दिख रहा है. अच्छा, नया नहीं? नया है, अच्छा, कलर निकला नहीं. अच्छा, बहुत टाइम लगता है कलर जाना. पक्का कलर है. ठीक है. Please pay attention. Now, when you consider a single tree, हम लोग pyramid of number की बात कर रहे हैं. तो when I consider a single tree, the producer count is 1. If we were to count the number of insects feeding on a big tree, that means the count is 1. Obviously, the number of insects is going to be huge. What kind of pyramid would we get? At this point, it will only be this kind of pyramid. The number of trees is 1 and this is the number of insects. They are continuing further. Now add an estimate of the number of small birds depending on the insects. So naturally the number of birds will be less than the number of insects. And also the number of larger birds eating the smaller ones. They again would be smaller than the ones. So is this the kind of diagram that we would be getting? Right? They have just posed one question. They have only posed one question कि भाई ये केस में कौन से टाइप का पिरामिड आपको मिलेगा. तो डेफिनेटली अपराइट तो नहीं मिलेगा क्योंकि आपका बेस 1 है खाली. ठीक है. सो दिस इज अ स्पिंडल शेप पिरामिड. दिस इज नॉट एन अपराइट पिरामिड. इट्स अ स्पिंडल पिरामिड. इट इज पॉइंटेड एट बोथ द एंड्स एंड एक्सपैंडेड इन द सेंटर. उसको स्पिंडल शेप बोलेंगे. So this would be pyramid of number in a forest ecosystem. So when you are asked for pyramid of number, you say pyramid of numbers are generally upright in majority of ecosystems except in a forest ecosystem where it is spindle shaped. Where it is spindle shaped.
Tigers and lions more than the trees. मतलब बस insects तक तो थोड़ा भी tigers, lions, wolves be more than the number of trees in the forest.
We have considered only one tree.
But don't तो tiger, lion
No.
जो मतलब tree पे
One tree as the producer, we are considering with respect to that. जहाँ पे just feed larger birds. Yeah.
how is tiger, lion a part of the tree then?
No. यहाँ पर instead of that consider larger birds, smaller birds, larger birds. जी बोलो. Where we are taking only few individuals. The entire tree is an ecosystem, no? It can be counted as a producer, no? Please. Huh?
The birds migrate on multiple trees, no? So you can't.
So they are part of a different food chain, no? Simple.
So they get energy from different trees. So you can't like.
So that's why this is an exception. The pyramid of biomass in the sea is inverted. This is your NCERT diagram, please. Pyramid of biomass in the sea is inverted because the biomass of fishes is more than that of phytoplanktons. Plankton start में define किया, they are those organisms which are floating passively along with the water currents, right? So they can flow on, go on to other systems also. Okay. Now, look at the biomass of the phytoplankton. This is the biomass of the zooplankton. So this is giving us an inverted pyramid. So this is a paradox, please. A smaller standing crop, biomass ka measurement at a particular time is called standing crop. I think that is what is mentioned here. Inverted pyramid of biomass, small standing crop of phytoplankton supporting a large standing crop of zooplankton. Zooplanktons are feeded upon by fishes. Okay. So how many exceptions to this? 2. One for pyramid of numbers, one for pyramid of biomass. Any exceptions for pyramid of energy? No. It is always upright. It can never be inverted. Ji. No, that's a paradox. It is because of the reproductive rate of phytoplankton and the generation time is less. There's a reason behind it.